Welcome to the Avatar series right here at Comicstorian, where we read comic books dramatically back to you, giving you an audio drama of your favorite stories. I'm Dan, your narrator, and today we will be covering part 2 of The Promise. Appa gently drifts through the clouds as Aang and Katara sit together, their heads resting against each other in a loving embrace. Ugh! Sokka sighs behind them, disgusted by the show of affection. What? Everybody does it, Toph tells him, picking her nose. But Sokka looks at her, explaining he was talking about them. Oh, you too, he tells her when he notices what she's doing. Finally, they drift over Toph's school and she goes to stand at the edge of Appa's saddle. Well, it's been fun, you guys, but I have to get back to my school, she tells him, preparing to leap off. But Sokka reaches out, holding her back and telling her she can't go and leave him with Katara and Aang. Well, you could come with me, she tells him with a smile. Sokka pauses. No. Hey, wait! What if I come with you? He tells her. Great idea, Sokka. I wish I'd thought of it, Toph tells him with a sigh. He turns back to his sister and Aang, telling them that he is going to check out the school. Katara agrees, telling him they'll pick him up on the way back from the Earth King. Aang moves to Appa's head, offering to land near the school, but Toph tells him not to worry, they're close enough to the ground, and she reaches out, grabbing Sokka's hand and pulling him to the edge of the saddle, and they leap off, plummeting towards the earth below as Sokka screams his head off. I gotta let go of you! But don't worry, Toph yells at him. I'm worried! Sokka begins to scream. Toph bends the earth below them, creating a platform that they slide down to the earth below. And with a final scream, Sokka finally lands hard on the ground. Told you not to worry, Toph says with a smile. I tasted my own stomach about halfway down, but by the end, not a bad way to travel, Sokka tells her, rubbing his backside. As they walk through the forest to her school, Sokka asks why she started it in the first place. Toph explains that she discovered how fulfilling teaching could be after she'd taught Aang how to earthbend. Aw, who are you kidding? You just like to tell people what to do, Sokka tells her, not believing a word she's saying. Yeah, and yelling. I love yelling, Toph tells him with a big smile. Stepping from the woods, they see Toph's 3 students walking away, bags over their shoulders. Just where do you think you lily-livers are going? Don't tell me you were trying to escape, give up on your training. I'm going to put so much hurt in you, you won't remember what day of the week it is, she yells at them. The students are shocked to see their teacher, reacting in a mix of fear and surprise. Toph sighs and introduces her students to Sokka. Hotun, Penga, and Mu. The Dark One. Lily-livers, this is my friend Sokka, she says. After the introductions are made, Toph cracks her knuckles, remembering they were just talking about pain. Please, Sifu Toph, we weren't trying to run away. We were kicked out, Hotun explains, wringing his hands in fear. They wouldn't even let me pack my shoes, Penga fumes. I hate practicing my forms, but getting kicked out is worse, the Dark One tells her. Toph's eyes widen in shock. Kicked out? Kicked out by who? She demands. Inside, the firebending class is interrupted as the door pushes inward, with Toph demanding that they leave her school. Master Kunio demands to know who disturbs the firebending dojo, but the ground begins to rumble at his feet. This is the Beifong Metal Bending Academy, she tells him, but Master Kunio twirls, burning the Beifong flag to reveal a Fire Nation flag. He tells her that they left the school for the Harmony Restoration movement, but now that Fire Lord Zuko has withdrawn his support, we've come to reclaim what is rightfully ours, he tells her. Toph slams her fist against the wall, explaining that this is the first ever metal bending school. Master Kunio smiles, telling her that it is wrong to sell fantasies to these poor dupes. Everyone knows that metal bending doesn't exist, he tells her with a smile. Suddenly, the weapons come off the wall, with a spear twisting around Kunio's head. At first he screams in fear, but finally drops into a fighting stance. Watch carefully, disciples. Your master is about to teach this dirt girl a lesson, he tells them. The ground begins to rumble as Toph adjusts her own stance. "Bring it on!" she tells him, but Sokka is there trying to calm both sides down. He suggests they let the students fight to decide which school is more effective. Kunio smiles, agreeing that the students should fight to the death. How about a match to sit instead? Sokka asks, explaining which team forces the other to sit down first wins. As long as we still get to beat people up, the fire students nod. Sokka nods, motioning for the door, and asking Master Kunio and his students to return in 3 days. At first, the firebending master begins to argue, but Toph tightens the spear around his head. 3 days it is, Kunio finally agrees, and the firebenders leave the school. Meanwhile, Aang and Katara have arrived in the Earth Kingdom capital. Aang tells Appa to find a hill to rest on before the two leap off into the air on Aang's glider. Landing in the city, the two decide that they need to find a place to spend the night. Before they can find their way to Iroh's tea house, they are distracted by a scream of glee. Two girls come forward, telling Aang that they are members of the official Aang fan club. "Wow, did you hear that? They started a fan club for me," Aang tells Katara with a big smile. Katara looks at the two girls, not happy. "Wonderful," she tells Aang. Aang introduces Momo to the group before finally motioning to Katara. "And this is Katara," he tells them. "Ahem," Katara coughs. "My girlfriend, Katara," Aang corrects. Katara waves and one of the girls bows. "What an honor it is to meet Aang's first girlfriend," the girl says with a suspicious smile on her face. Katara doesn't like that look and tries to steer Aang away, noting that they still need to find a place to stay. But the girls interrupt again, offering to let them stay at the clubhouse. And so they take them to the clubhouse, explaining that it was modeled after the original Air Temple. While not quite sure, Aang bows to them for their kindness. "I love it! Thank you, official Avatar Aang fan club. I'm flattered," he tells them before grabbing Katara's hand and pulling her in to check it out. "Can't wait," Katara groans. Meanwhile, in the Fire Nation, Fire Lord Zuko sits down in front of his father's cell while the two share tea. Ozai begins to tell a story of when Zuko was younger and how he ran to save a turtle crab from a hawk. "Even then, you possessed an odd affinity for the weak," Ozai remembers. After Zuko had saved the crab, he watched the hawk, realizing that it would starve without food. Zuko couldn't decide who he would side with, but it didn't matter. A massive wave pulled him out to the ocean, and Ozai was forced to jump in to save his son. But Zuko doesn't want to hear any more stories. He came here asking how his father would sleep with the pressures of ruling the Fire Nation. "I told you," Ozai answers simply. Finally, the former Fire Lord stands, telling his son that he is tired. "Perhaps we will continue this tomorrow. Bring more tea," he tells him before returning to the shadows of his cell. Back at the metal bending school, the students launch an attack at a row of metal coins. But the coins don't even shiver. They begin to argue and fight amongst themselves as Toph and Sokka watch. "These were the most qualified students you could find, huh?" Sokka finally asks. But Toph rolls up her sleeve, explaining that it was the space bracelet that found the students. "Oh, how I miss you, Space Sword," Sokka says sadly, looking towards the ceiling. Toph explains that a year ago she realized the bracelet would shiver when she was near someone who was super emotional. So Toph thought that someone who could make the bracelet move could also possibly be a metal bender. "And I started recruiting them for my school," she tells him. Sokka agrees, remembering that Katara discovered she was a waterbender when she would get super mad at him. "Yeah, but there's a problem finding students that way. What kind of people get super emotional in public?" Toph asks, looking in at her students who are still fighting amongst themselves. Crazy people?" Sokka asks. "Crazy people!" Toph agrees with a scream. Toph also points out that not a single one of her students has ever been able to move metal. "Not even a coin," she grumbles. Sokka suddenly has a brilliant idea, telling her that he is a motivational bender and he can get them to do it. "Leave your students to me," he tells her. Later, Sokka stands before the students, a cloth wrapped around his head as he holds up a coin to them. To become a true metal bender, you not only have to see the metal, but hear the metal, taste the metal, be the metal, he explains to them. That doesn't make sense, Hotun tells him. But Sokka just yells at them to give it a shot and orders them to take a strong stance. He steps before them, telling them to gather their chi in their gut, to feel their guts heating up like a furnace. Now let your gut furnace refine your senses. Close your eyes and feel the earth around you. Then feel the metal within the earth. Now feel the metal coins and stop them in midair, he yells, throwing a stack of coins at the students. But they all just get hit in the head, falling to the ground and moaning. Toph comes up and punches him on the arm. Nice going, oh bender of people's motivation. Amazing what a difference a fancy headband makes, she tells him with a smile. You're not very helpful right now, you know. You're not very helpful right now, he tells her. Meanwhile, Aang is busy showing off for the girls at the fan club while Katara looks on, unhappy. First, he shows them his air scooters, then makes music for them when one of the girls brings forth an air flute. Finally, Katara comes forward, telling Aang they should probably get going to meet the Earth King. You're probably right, Aang agrees. As they leave, Aang waves bye to the girls. Weren't they amazing? He asks Katara. He tells her that he knows it's silly, but having the club was almost like having a family again. Thanks for agreeing to stay there for the night, sweetie. It meant the world to me, Aang tells her. Katara is shocked and suddenly feels bad about her jealousy. Don't thank me, Aang. I don't deserve it, she tells him as they walk through the city streets. Back in the Fire Nation, Zuko returns to his father's cell, once more bringing tea. I stayed up all night thinking about what you said, Zuko tells Ozai, explaining that he believes his father thinks he should have sided with the Hawk, because it is strong and noble like the Fire Nation, that it had earned its meal. But Zuko explains that he has done that. He has sided with his people and has begun to look out for their needs. But Ozai shakes his head, telling his son that he misunderstands. Why he does not sleep is because of his inability to choose sides. He is wrong about the Hawk. What I'm saying is that there is no right or wrong apart from what you decide. Who you choose to defend deserves to be defended solely because you chose them. You are the Fire Lord. What you choose, by definition, is right, Ozai tells his son. There is a moment of silence between the two before Zuko explodes at his father. No! Right and wrong are bigger than me, or you, or even the Avatar, Zuko tells him, explaining that he believes that he, Aang, and the Earth King can come closest to what's right by working together. But Ozai disagrees, asking Zuko if he believes that the Earth King will be reasonable after what the Fire Nation has done to him and his people. Do you think he will treat the colonies fairly? Ozai asks. He asks if Zuko thinks that the Earth King will send his armies, and tells Zuko that he must defend his colonials furiously. Not simply because they are your people, but because they are an expression of your will. Zuko continues to argue, telling his father that he trusts Avatar Aang's thoughts on the subject. Finally, Ozai stands, telling his son that he sickens him. Leave my presence, he commands. Zuko sits, shocked by his father's words. Who are you to talk to me this way? Have you forgotten your current place? He demands. But Ozai merely repeats his words. Leave my presence, he shouts. As Zuko leaves the prison, Suki watches him walking through the dark. At the school, Toph once again instructs her students, commanding them to stoke their gut furnace and feel the metal before them. Now kick! Kick like your life depends on it, she yells. The students lash out! But still the poles do not shiver. Aren't you going to yell at us? Hotun asks. No, Toph answers sadly. Sokka interrupts her, asking to speak with her outside about something very important. I just had the best idea ever, he exclaims as they step outside. He explains that to make them metal benders, they have to make them super emotional. And how do you plan to do that? Let me guess, 2 fancy headbands? Toph asks. But Sokka ignores her, explaining that with Hotun they just need to use Doom, and with Penga they just need to use Shoes, and the only one he can't figure out is the Dark One. His real name. I promised I wouldn't tell anybody, Toph explains. Sokka immediately starts begging her to tell him what his real name is. She leans in, whispering, "No way! What were his parents thinking?" Sokka explains, leaning back in surprise. As Sokka continues, explaining his plan, he tells her that they need some metal, and Toph leads him down into the school's armory, where the Fire Nation armor and weapons wait. Sokka begins to describe what he needs Toph to do with her metal bending, and begin to bend the armor into a different shape. "That's incredible, Toph Beifong, you've truly outdone yourself," he tells her when their work is complete. "Just call me the greatest earthbender of all time," she laughs, dusting her hands off. Sokka laughs too, but Toph pauses. "No, really, I want you to call me that," she tells him. "Toph, you're the greatest earthbender of all time," Sokka says. "Gee, thanks, Sokka, that's sweet of you," Toph tells him with a big smile. Meanwhile, back at the palace of the Earth King, Aang and Katara bow before the ruler. The king is happy to see them, glad that they are in the Earth Kingdom and aiding with the removal of the Fire Nation colonies. "That's why we're here, Your Majesty. We'd like to set a meeting between you and Fire Lord Zuko. Yu Dao is still there," Katara explains. "For now," Aang adds. King Kuei is shocked that Zuko still refuses to continue his support for the Harmony Restoration movement. "Earth King Kuei, I am on your side," Aang tells him, believing that the Fire Nation people don't belong in the Earth Kingdom. But Katara interrupts. "Fire Lord Zuko has legitimate concerns about the colonials that still live here. We really need to sit down and talk through the options. Maybe there's something we missed," she tells them. But King Kuei isn't so sure. Back at the Beifong school, the students sit outside that night, with Hotun talking about how outside is so doomy. But Sokka explains that the camping is for a team bonding experiment. He gathers them around, beginning to tell a story about the flying boar flag that hung in the school. Sifu Toph hung that banner there to placate the winged boar spirit that still haunts these mountains, he tells them, leaning into the fire. "The winged boar spirit, the harbinger of doom, and the eater of fine footwear," he yells. Suddenly, the creature appears behind them, created from the bended metal of the Fire Nation army. "And now that Kunyo's burned down the banner, we can probably expect... Oh look! Speaking of the winged boar spirit, it's right there!" he yells. Hotun immediately faints, while Penga yells that the boar spirit is eating her shoes. "This is ridiculous. I know that's you in there, Sifu Toph," the Dark One says, not worried at all. The head opens, revealing the smiling face of Toph. "Very perceptive, Dark One. Or should I say, Moochie Gucci Lapucci the Third," she yells. The Dark One is shocked, falling to his knees as tears begin to pour down his face. "By saying that name, you have lodged a splinter into my soul," he gasps. Sokka steps forward, ordering the students to harness the emotion that is coursing through their bodies. "Let's metal bend, Team Beifong!" he yells, throwing coins at the students. But the students are all laying on the ground, crushed by their emotions. At the Earth Kingdom Palace, Aang and Katara continue to eat their delicious meal. Finally, King Kuei returns, thanking them for giving him time to ponder their proposal. But his face falls when Aang asks when they should set up the meeting. "I'm sorry, but you're not going to like what I have to say," he tells them. "All my life, I've been weak. So weak that my most trusted advisor was able to hide 100 years' war behind a curtain of lies. Well, I'm tired of being weak. It's time for me to be a man. I will not stand for any more lies. I will order the general how to lead my troops to Yu Dao and enforce harmony," he declares. Aang stands up, trying to explain to the king that sending troops will be seen as a declaration of war. But the Earth King turns away. telling him that the Fire Nation colonials will either leave peacefully or face dire consequences. If you are not with me, Avatar Aang, then I can only assume that you are against me, he declares, leaving the room. That night, Sokka finds Toph on the steps of her school. He tells her not to give up, that he has the new best idea ever. Have you ever thought about metal? She asks. Nope. When I have extra thinking time, I usually spend it on food. Meat, specifically, Sokka tells her. But Toph continues, explaining that metal is part of the earth that has been refined by going through pressure and pain. She explains that she discovered metal bending in a tiny cell when she was being brought back to her parents. They expected me to be something I'm not. All I felt was pressure and pain, she tells him. When she discovered her students, she brought them here to be metal benders. I was gonna make them tough enough to move the most stubborn part of the most stubborn element. I expected them to be something they're not, she explains. Inside, Hotun, Penga, and the Dark One stop trying to sneak out and listen to their teacher's words. How is that any different than what my parents did to me? Maybe the Beifong Metal Bending Academy is just a way for me to pass all that pressure and pain to someone else. She sighs, and she walks away from Sokka, explaining to him that when Kunio arrives tomorrow, she is going to sit down in front of him. He can have his school back. Rushing from the Earth Palace, Aang and Katara hop aboard Appa, hoping to return to Yudao quickly, hoping to convince the Fire Nation colonials to leave peacefully before the Earth Kingdom's army arrives. As they leave, Aang points out that King Kuei is right, and no one should break their promise. Unknown to them, someone hides in the bushes. The young girl sends out a messenger hawk, telling it to warn the sisters in the Avatar Aang fan club in Yudao that Aang will need their help. The next morning, Kunio bursts open the school doors, still with the spear wrapped around his head, but now draped with Fire Nation flags. "Nice headgear," Sokka comments. "I find it a convenient way to carry my flags. I can take it off whenever I want," Kunio growls as he storms past. The Fire Dojo Master walks up to Toph, demanding to know where her students are, that it is time to begin. "Our deadly match to the... sit," he exclaims. But Toph is sad, telling him that she doesn't know where her students are, but it doesn't matter. "You win this match to sit," she tells him, and she begins to sit down. But suddenly her students burst through the door. "Sifu Toph, don't sit down!" Hotun yells. And with these words, the metal coins shiver a small amount, and it suddenly shoots across the room, hitting Toph in the butt, bringing her back to her feet. Toph is too shocked to be angry as she glances around the room. "Hotun? Did you just metal bend?" she asks. She smiles at them, telling them that normally she would pound them into the ground for hitting her in the butt. But in this case, good job, she smiles, giving him the thumbs up. Kunio tells his students to attack, and the metal benders spread out. Sokka throws a handful of coins, giving his friends some ammo. Hotun uses the coins to attack one of the firebenders, knocking them out of the air. Penga laughs as she hits another student in the butt with the coins. "This is easy," she shouts. The firebenders try to create a shield, but the coins only heat up, hurting them more. Kunio yells for his students to keep fighting, but the three metal benders continue to launch coins across the room, knocking him around until he falls on his butt and sits down. A short time later, the firebenders help their teacher as they limp away. Sokka leans down, congratulating the metal benders on a job well done, and the Dark One tells Toph that they overheard what she said about them last night. "I don't get it. I didn't say one nice thing about you," she says, not understanding. But Penga smiles. "You told Sokka that you expected us to become metal benders," she says with a smile. "Nobody's ever expected me to be anything other than a wimp, Sifu Toph. You're the first person to believe that we can become something more than we are," Hotun tells her with a smile. Toph wipes away a tear where her students can't see, before suddenly turning on them. Well, what are you lily livers waiting for then? You think getting some coins to fly through the air makes you metal-bending masters? Get back to practice, she yells with a smile. They all bow with respect. Yes, Sifu Toph, they shout in unison. Meanwhile, Zuko sits in the Fire Lord's throne, flames shooting all around him before he sighs. This isn't me, he says with a wave of his hand putting out the flames. I know you've been secretly meeting with Ozai, May tells him as she enters the chamber. Zuko is shocked, asking where she heard this. Does it matter? Not from you, she tells him with a frown. Zuko apologizes for screwing up, telling her that he loves her, but May shakes her head, letting him know that he loves his secrets more. Goodbye, Fire Lord, she says, bowing and turning to leave. Anger, sadness, and despair fill Zuko. May, come back! I order you to come back, he shouts, but she leaves him alone in the empty room. Why would I say that? He hisses to himself. Behind him, Suki bows. She tells him that it was her fault and that she was the one who told May and wanted her to speak with him. However, that wasn't quite what I had in mind, she tells him. She explains that she followed him and that the Kyoshi warriors are worried about him. I'm really worried about you, she whispers, reaching out her hand for his. But they are interrupted as General Mok enters the room. The general bows as he gives his report. Your suspicions are confirmed. The Earth King's army now marches towards Yu Dao, the general tells him. The armies of the Earth Kingdom march through the mountains, preparing to forcibly remove the Fire Nation colonials from their lands. And meanwhile, the Fire Nation Navy moves across the oceans, preparing to defend those loyal to the Fire Nation, and the kingdoms prepare to clash. And that concludes part 2 of The Promise. If you guys enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a like and leave a comment down below. And if you want to get more of this, please be sure to subscribe to the channel and click that bell to get those notifications. And if you enjoyed me reading this, I am Dan, and you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at DanTProducer, or on Twitch at twitch.tv/Cyloo91, CYLOO91. Thank you guys so much, and I hope to see you again next time for part 3.